Point B for today's notes. This is American History 3B, Day 3. England plants the Jamestown seedling on the coast. The big picture of Point B is that Jamestown was able to be a successful colony and really gave the British a foothold in America. This slide is important. Pause it to make sure that you have time to look at both aspects, both push and pull, reasons why there were repeated European migrations to the Americas in the 1600s, despite the hardship that settlers faced once they arrived. Top 6 items you might say for the push is that settlers were often leaving direct religious persecution. Those who settled Maryland were fleeing the persecution of Catholic people. Certain Puritan groups were persecuted, Quakers persecuted, on and on. And number 2 goes along with that. What would the future be for those people? There was a lot of political change and turmoil in Europe, and the economy and the opportunity for land in Europe was non-existent. You couldn't make a new start for your family's future. Along those lines, number 5, jobs became scarcer. With the enclosure system in Europe, some farmers were forced out without suitable urban jobs to replace them at first. And then there's number 6, the desire for adventure. So you have to want or accept a little bit of uncertainty to go across that ocean. Basically, today it would feel like going to outer space. It was such a different life, and many times they could not afford either money or health-wise to get back to their previous life and their relatives and everything. What's the pull? Well, word of mouth by the few that did journey back, and by advertisements, etc., talked about the wealth available in America. And then you can read those other 5 opportunities there to get a plot of land, to get a future for your family, to join family that had already come, to be able to worship safely. And for some who had the gifts of evangelism and missions, desire to spread the gospel to people who hadn't heard it much or in a while. Note number 1 in this section is that in 1606, the Virginia Company, which was a corporation, mercantile corporation, had a charter from King James I, and you think Jamestown, to settle in the New World. And the king could award certain high political positions and land to those who would go and do that. Note number 2 is that stockholders in joint stock companies hoped to make profit while sharing the risk. So stock was used, the risk was divided among shareholders who would also all benefit if the colony was successful. And there is a map of the colony of Virginia for the first 100 and almost 70 years. So Virginia's already been a colony for a long time by the time the Declaration of Independence is signed. And several of the chief contributors, not all of them, but several, to early American government did hail from Virginia. Definitely a central colony in the new American government. And kind of a new innovation was that the charter gave the settlers the same rights as Englishmen in Britain or Englishwomen in Britain. And this promise was one of the reasons that rebellion later ferments in the 1760s and 1770s, because the people who originally went on this promise saw it as not ultimately fulfilled, due to taxation without representation in the end. So it sounded a lot better at first, and then maybe 5-6 generations later, Britain tried to use its colonists to pay debts that it had reason for, but we'll talk about that later. Just 100 British settlers founded Jamestown, and they were going to go through some very horrific times, putting